What happens when a Hollywood icon walks onto a daytime talk show expecting a normal conversation, but instead finds himself in a moment that will turn the entire room silent? The lights are bright, the audience is smiling, the hosts are holding their cards, and everything feels routine, until a single question changes the tone of the entire show. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to The Truth Narrator, like this video, and comment below, because stories like this don't come around often, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The studio felt different that day, though most people couldn't tell why. The audience filed in like they always did, chatting, laughing, waiting for the hosts to walk out. The music played, the cameras moved into position, and the familiar energy of daytime television filled the air. But behind the scenes, there was a quiet tension. Producers were whispering. Assistants were moving faster than usual. Someone kept checking the guest's schedule over and over again, as if expecting something to go wrong. When George Clooney walked onto the stage, the audience erupted into applause. He smiled, waved, and greeted the hosts with his usual calm confidence. He had done hundreds of interviews. Red carpets, press tours, live shows. Nothing really shook him anymore. He knew how this worked. Sit down, smile, answer a few funny questions, promote the new project, shake hands, and leave. Simple. At first, everything went exactly like that. The hosts joked with him. The audience laughed. Clooney told a funny story about filming. Everyone clapped, and the conversation flowed easily. But Joy Behar was quiet for a while. She watched, smiled politely, but didn't jump in like she usually did. She flipped her card once, then again, like she was waiting for the right moment. And then it came. Joy leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but sharp. "George, you've been in Hollywood a long time. You've seen how things really work behind the scenes. So let me ask you something people don't usually ask you on these friendly interviews. Do you think Hollywood protects powerful men?" The audience made a small, uncertain sound, not quite a gasp, not quite silence, but something in between. It was the kind of question that changes the air in the room. Clooney's smile didn't disappear, but it froze slightly, like a photograph paused at the wrong moment. He leaned back a little, thinking. "That's a big question for a morning show," he said, half joking, half serious. Joy didn't smile. "It's a real question." There was a pause, a long one. The kind that television doesn't like. The kind producers usually cut out. But this was live. Clooney looked down for a second, then back up. "I think power protects power," he said slowly. "Not just in Hollywood. Everywhere." The audience clapped lightly, unsure if they were supposed to clap. One of the other hosts quickly jumped in, trying to lighten the mood, making a joke about Clooney always being diplomatic. Everyone laughed again, but the tension didn't leave. It stayed there, sitting quietly at the table like an uninvited guest. Joy looked at him again. "But you didn't really answer the question," she said. "Do you think people in your industry stay silent because it benefits them?" Now the room went very quiet. Clooney crossed his hands, then uncrossed them. He wasn't smiling anymore. Not angry, just serious now. Very serious. "I think," he said carefully, "that it's easy for people on the outside to think they know how someone should act when they're not the ones whose careers, families, and lives could be affected by speaking up." Joy replied quickly. "So that's a yes?" A few people in the audience gasped softly. The other hosts shifted in their seats. One of them tried to interrupt again, but Joy continued, her voice still calm, but now clearly pushing. "Because a lot of people believe celebrities speak about issues only when it's safe, when it doesn't cost them anything. So I'm asking you, did it ever cost you anything to speak out?" That question landed hard. You could see it in Clooney's face. The easy charm was gone now. He looked directly at Joy, and for the first time, the conversation felt less like an interview and more like a confrontation. "Yes," he said. "It did." Joy tilted her head slightly. "Like what?" Another long pause. And then Clooney said something that no one in the studio expected him to say. "You don't always see the cost," he said quietly. "You just see the part where someone is still standing at the end." The audience was completely silent now. No laughter. No clapping. Just cameras moving slowly, capturing every expression, every reaction. Joy looked at him for a moment, and then she said something that would later be replayed all over the internet, on news channels, on social media, everywhere. "But you're still one of the most powerful men in Hollywood, George. So how high could the cost really be?" The second she said that, the entire mood of the room changed. One of the hosts whispered, "Joy," under her breath like a warning. The producers behind the cameras started moving. signaling to wrap the segment soon. But it was too late now. The moment had already happened. Clooney didn't speak immediately. He just looked at Joy, and the look on his face wasn't anger. It was something else. Something heavier. Something more personal. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, but there was an edge in it now. "You want me to answer that honestly?" he asked. Joy didn't hesitate. "Yes." And that's when the conversation stopped being a normal TV interview and turned into something no one in that studio would forget. The room felt smaller somehow, like the walls had moved closer while no one was looking. The audience sat completely still, the way people do when they realize they are no longer watching entertainment. They are watching something real. George Clooney leaned slightly forward, his hands clasped together, his eyes locked on Joy Behar. The easy charm he walked in with was gone now, replaced by something more serious, something heavier. "You want me to answer that honestly?" he repeated, his voice calm but firmer this time. Joy didn't look away. "Yes," she said again. Clooney nodded slowly, like he had just made a decision in his head. "Okay," he said. "But if we're going to do that, then we should be honest about everything. Not just the parts that make good television." You could feel the shift immediately. One of the hosts adjusted her papers, even though she wasn't reading them. Another host forced a small smile, the kind people use when they don't know what else to do. Somewhere behind the cameras, a producer made a circular motion with their finger, the silent signal to move the conversation along. But no one at the table moved on. Joy spoke again. "I am being honest. I'm asking you a direct question. And I'm giving you a direct answer," Clooney replied. "Yes, it costs something to speak out. Sometimes it costs you jobs. Sometimes it costs you relationships. Sometimes it costs you years of your life working on something that suddenly disappears because you said the wrong thing to the wrong person." There was a murmur in the audience now, very quiet, but noticeable. Joy leaned back slightly. "But you still have a career. A very successful one." Clooney nodded. "Yes, I do. And I'm grateful for that. But you're measuring cost in money and visibility. That's not where the real cost always is." The way he said it made the other hosts look at him differently now. This wasn't a promotional interview anymore. He wasn't here to tell funny stories. He was saying something real, and everyone at the table knew it. Joy crossed her arms slightly. "So where is the real cost?" Clooney looked down for a moment, then back up. "The real cost is when you realize how many people stay quiet not because they're evil, not because they don't care, but because they're scared. And the system knows that. The system survives on that." The audience was completely silent again. One of the hosts finally jumped in, trying to soften the moment. "I think what Joy is trying to ask is whether you think celebrities have a responsibility to use their platform." Clooney turned his head slightly toward her and nodded politely. "They do," he said. "But responsibility is complicated. Because the same people who tell celebrities to speak up are often the first to tear them apart when they do." Joy responded quickly. "That sounds like an excuse." That word, excuse, landed hard. You could actually hear someone in the audience whisper, "Wow," under their breath. Clooney didn't react immediately. He just looked at Joy for a few seconds, and when he spoke again, his voice was still calm, but now there was something else in it. Not anger. Not exactly. It sounded more like disappointment. "It's not an excuse," he said. "It's a reality." Joy shook her head slightly. "Some people would say reality is very comfortable for certain people in Hollywood." One of the other hosts quietly said, "Okay, maybe we should," but Joy continued. "I'm not attacking you, George," Joy said. "I'm challenging the idea that powerful people in Hollywood are somehow outsiders to the system, when in reality, they benefit from it more than anyone." That was the moment the audience split. You could feel it. Some people nodded slightly. Others looked uncomfortable. The tension wasn't just between two people anymore. It had spread to the whole room. Clooney took a slow breath. "You're right," he said. "Powerful people do benefit from the system. That's true in Hollywood, in politics, in business, everywhere. The question is what you do with that power once you have it." Joy leaned forward again. "So what did you do with it?" That question sounded simple, but the way she asked it made it sound like a test. Clooney smiled slightly, but it wasn't a happy smile. "Well, I'm here talking to you, aren't I?" he said. A few people in the audience laughed nervously, but Joy didn't laugh. "I'm serious," she said. "So am I," Clooney replied. "You're asking me why more people don't speak out? Sometimes it's because when they do, the conversation turns into this. Not a conversation, but a trial. Suddenly you're not a person about a problem. You're a person being judged for not solving the entire problem yourself. Joy replied, public figures are judged. That's part of being a public figure. Clooney nodded. Yes, it is. But there's a difference between accountability and public sport. Sometimes people don't want accountability, they want a target. The audience reacted to that. Not loudly, but you could feel the energy shift again. Even the other hosts were now just listening instead of trying to control the conversation. Joy was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that changed the tone again. Let me ask you something else then, she said. Do you think Hollywood is a moral place? The question almost sounded philosophical, but the way she asked it made it sound like a trap. Clooney actually laughed a little when he heard it, but there was no humor in his eyes. No, he said. I think Hollywood is a business. And like most businesses, it cares about money first, image second, and morality somewhere down the list when it's convenient. That answer got a reaction. A real one this time. Some people clapped. Some people looked shocked that he said it so directly. Joy raised her eyebrows slightly. That's a very honest answer. You asked for honesty, Clooney said. And honesty sometimes makes people uncomfortable, Joy replied. Clooney nodded slowly. Yes, he said. It does. There was a long pause after that. A very long pause. The kind where everyone is thinking but no one is speaking. Then Joy said quietly, Do you think you're part of the problem? The entire studio went completely silent. Not a single person moved. Even the hosts looked at Joy in surprise this time. That question was different. That question was personal. Clooney didn't answer right away. He looked at the table, then at the audience, then back at Joy. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before. Yes, he said. I probably am. For a moment after he said it, no one moved. No one spoke. The silence in the studio didn't feel awkward anymore. It felt heavy, like everyone was holding the same thought, but no one wanted to be the first to say it out loud. George Clooney sat there, calm, composed. But the admission hung in the air like a bell that had been rung and was still echoing. Joy Behar looked at him carefully, like she was trying to decide whether he really meant it or whether he was just being diplomatic again. You probably are, she repeated. That's a very big thing to admit on television. Clooney nodded slightly. It shouldn't be, he said. The truth shouldn't be a big thing to admit. One of the other hosts shifted in her seat and tried to lighten the tone again. I think what Joy is trying to get at is. But Joy interrupted gently, without looking away from Clooney. No, I think he understands exactly what I'm getting at. The audience made a small sound again. That quiet murmur that happens when people realize they are watching two people who are not going to back down. Joy leaned forward, her hands folded. If you think you're part of the problem, then why didn't you do more sooner? There it was again, another direct question, another moment where the conversation could either calm down or go somewhere even deeper. Clooney didn't look offended. If anything, he looked like he expected that question. Because, he said slowly, when you're inside something for a long time, it doesn't look the same as it does from the outside. From the inside, everything feels normal. That's how systems work. They become normal. Joy responded quickly. That sounds like something people say when they want to avoid responsibility. Clooney shook his head slightly. No, it's something people say when they're trying to explain how easy it is to convince yourself that staying quiet is the reasonable choice. The audience was completely with them now. You could see it on their faces. No one was checking their phones. No one was whispering. They were watching every word. Joy tilted her head. So when did it stop feeling reasonable to you? Clooney leaned back in his chair, thinking. Probably the moment I realized that being liked is not the same as being respected, he said. That line hit the room in a different way. You could actually hear a few people in the audience say, wow, under their breath. Joy noticed it too. Explain that, she said. Clooney nodded. Being liked is easy. You smile, you tell good stories, you don't make trouble, and everyone invites you to the party. Being respected is different. Respect sometimes comes from doing things that make people very uncomfortable. Joy didn't smile this time. And have you done that? Clooney looked at her directly. Sometimes, he said. Not always. Not as often as I probably should have. One of the hosts finally spoke up again, more softly this time. I think a lot of people at home might be surprised hearing you say that. Clooney shrugged slightly. People at home should never assume that people on television have everything figured out, he said. Most of us are just better at hiding our mistakes. Joy crossed her arms again, but this time she wasn't attacking. She was listening. Do you regret it? She asked. Yes, Clooney said immediately. Everyone regrets the moments where they chose comfort over courage. If they say they don't, they're lying. The audience reacted again, not loudly, but you could feel that sentence land. It was too honest to ignore. Joy looked down at her cards for the first time in a while, then back up. You know, a lot of people think celebrities live in a completely different world, she said. More money, more power, more freedom. But listening to you right now, it sounds more like a different kind of pressure. That's exactly what it is, Clooney said. It's pressure, because the higher up you go, the smaller the room gets. And eventually, you realize you're seeing the same people everywhere. The same executives, the same investors, the same decision makers. And if you make one of those rooms uncomfortable, suddenly you're not in the room anymore. That line made the other hosts look at each other. That was not a normal thing to say on a daytime show. That was the kind of sentence that gets clipped, posted online, debated, analyzed. Joy asked quietly, "So you're saying people stay quiet because they're afraid of being shut out?" "I'm saying people are human," Clooney replied. "And humans are afraid of losing what they have. That doesn't make it right. But it makes it real." There was another long pause. But this pause felt different. It didn't feel like a fight anymore. It felt like two people trying to get to the truth from two different directions. Joy finally said, "You know what people at home are probably thinking right now?" Clooney gave a small smile. "What?" "They're thinking, this is the most honest conversation we've ever seen on this show," she said. Some people in the audience actually laughed softly at that, because it was probably true. Clooney smiled a little too, but then Joy said one more thing. And this time her voice was softer than it had been the entire interview. "But honesty has a price too," she said. "So let me ask you one last thing, George. Are you still paying for it?" The question hung in the air. Clooney looked at her for a long moment. He didn't look angry. He didn't look defensive. He looked tired. Not physically tired, the kind of tired that comes from carrying something for a long time. When he finally answered, his voice was almost quiet. "Yes," he said. "Everyone who tells the truth about a powerful system keeps paying for it. The only difference is whether people can see the bill or not." At that point, no one in the studio was thinking about time anymore. No one was thinking about commercial breaks or show schedules. The conversation had gone somewhere deeper than anyone expected, and everyone could feel that they were now very far from where the interview had started. And then, just when it seemed like the conversation might finally slow down, Joy said something that changed the direction one more time. "Then maybe the real question isn't whether Hollywood is broken," she said slowly. "Maybe the real question is why people keep pretending it isn't." Clooney looked at her, and for the first time since the interview started, he didn't answer immediately. Because this time there was no easy answer. The silence after Joy's last sentence didn't feel like television anymore. It felt like something else entirely, like a conversation that was never supposed to happen in a bright studio with coffee mugs and cue cards. George Clooney sat there looking at the table for a moment, then back at Joy, and you could see in his expression that he understood what she was really asking now. Not about Hollywood, not about power, about truth, about why people protect systems they privately admit are broken. He exhaled slowly and leaned back in his chair. "Because," he said, choosing each word carefully, "pretending is expensive, but telling the truth can be even more expensive." No one interrupted him this time. "The truth changes how people see you," he continued. "And once people see you differently, they treat you differently. And once they treat you differently, doors close. Phones stop ringing. Invitations stop coming. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Slowly. So slowly that from the outside, it looks like nothing happened at all." The audience was so quiet now that you could hear someone cough in the back row. Joy didn't argue this time. She just listened. The confrontation from earlier had turned into something else. Something more like two people trying to say something honest while knowing there were millions of people listening. One of the hosts finally spoke softly. "Do you think things are changing?" Clooney nodded a little. "Yes," he said. "But change is never as fast as people want it to be. Because the people who benefit from the system are the ones who control the system. And people rarely redesign a system that benefits them." Joy added quietly, "So then what actually changes things?" Clooney looked at the audience for a moment before answering. "Pressure," he said. "Public pressure. Cultural pressure. Enough people saying this is not okay at the same time. That's the only thing that has ever changed anything in history. Not comfort. Not silence. Pressure." The audience started clapping lightly. Not the loud, excited clapping from earlier, but a slower, more thoughtful applause. The kind of applause that means people are not just entertained, they're thinking. Joy looked around at the audience clapping, then back at Clooney. "You know this conversation is going to be everywhere later," she said. Clooney gave a small smile. Conversations usually go everywhere when they make people uncomfortable. Joy actually smiled back a little. "Well, then we definitely did that today." One of the producers off camera was now clearly signaling that time was almost up. The hosts could see it. The conversation had gone much longer and much deeper than planned. This was supposed to be a light interview. A few laughs. A movie promotion. Instead, it had turned into something that felt more like a public confession mixed with a debate about power and responsibility. Joy looked at Clooney one more time and asked the final question. "Do you think conversations like this matter?" she said. "Or do they just become another viral clip and then everyone forgets?" Clooney thought about it for a few seconds. "I think they matter," he said. "Not because one conversation changes everything, but because one conversation makes the next conversation possible. And then the next one. And the next one. And eventually, something that was impossible to say out loud becomes normal to say out loud. And that's where change actually starts." The room was quiet again, but this time it didn't feel tense. It felt reflective. Joy nodded slowly. "I can agree with that," she said. For the first time since the interview started, the conversation felt calm again. Not resolved, not neatly wrapped up, but understood. Like both of them had said what they came to say, even if neither of them planned to say it when the show started. The other host smiled and turned to the camera, clearly trying to bring the show back into its normal format. "Well," she said, "this has certainly been a conversation." Some people in the audience laughed softly, the tension finally breaking. Clooney smiled again, the relaxed version of his smile finally returning. But he still looked thoughtful, like part of his mind was somewhere else, still thinking about everything that had just been said. As the segment ended and the music started to play, the audience applauded, louder this time. Not just because a celebrity had been on the show, but because they felt like they had witnessed something real. Something unscripted. Something that wasn't supposed to go the way it went. But what happened after the show was where the story really exploded. Clips of the interview spread across the internet within hours. Headlines appeared everywhere. Some people praised the conversation, calling it one of the most honest celebrity interviews in years. Others argued that it was uncomfortable, too political, too confrontational for a daytime show. Social media split into sides like it always does. Some people said Joy was right to push hard and ask difficult questions. Others said she crossed a line and turned an interview into an interrogation. But the one clip that spread the fastest was not the loudest moment or the most dramatic line. It was the quiet moment when Clooney said, "Everyone regrets the moments where they chose comfort over courage." That line was shared everywhere, because it didn't just sound like a Hollywood problem. It sounded like a human problem, a life problem, something everyone understood. And that's why the conversation didn't disappear the next day, like most interviews do. People kept talking about it. On TV, on podcasts, online, at work, at dinner tables. Because it wasn't really about Hollywood anymore. It was about what people do when telling the truth becomes uncomfortable. When doing the right thing might cost you something. When staying quiet feels easier, but doesn't feel right. And that's why that moment on that show didn't just become another interview. It became a story. A story about power. About silence. About truth. About the price people pay for speaking. And the price they pay for staying quiet. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Joy Behar crossed the line with her questions? Or do you think she asked the questions that needed to be asked? And what about George Clooney? Do you think he was being completely honest or just carefully honest? Comment your opinion below, because this is one of those conversations where there is no single right answer, only perspectives. And if you want more dramatic, emotional, and explosive stories like this, make sure you subscribe to the Truth Narrator like this video and share it with someone who loves these kinds of behind-the-scenes Hollywood stories. Because sometimes the most powerful moments are not in movies. They're in real life.